Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this online policy dialogue on Sustainable Finance 101, State of Play and Next Steps, organized by the European Policy Center and supported by Accountancy Europe. My name is Stefan Sipka. I'm a policy analyst at the APC, and I will be moderating this event. So today's discussion will be about sustainable financing, its importance in achieving the objectives of the Green Deal, and we will also be looking at the Sustainable Finance Agenda, the EU Sustainable Finance Agenda, state of play, and future developments, given the renewed Sustainable Finance Strategy, which is expected to be adopted soon. So that is the topic of today's discussion, to discuss this topic, we invited 4 panelists. I will introduce them shortly, and we are expecting one more to join us, hopefully soon. I will introduce first. I'd like to introduce Marcel Haag, so a Director, Horizontal Policies, the DG Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union, DG FISMA, European Commission. Olivier Boutellis-Taft, CEO at Accountancy Europe, and Mathilde Crêpy, Senior Program Manager, the Environmental Coalition on Standards, ECOS. And we are expecting also Sirpa Pietikäinen, a member of the European Parliament from the European People's Party, to join us hopefully soon. But indeed, I think we have a very interesting topic today, because when we talk about the European Green Deal, it often boils down to money, how to ensure enough financial resources to support the transition from the public sector, public investments, but also from private investors, and how to unlock these possibilities to use these funds for the green transition in the EU, but also looking also beyond. So yeah, happy to have you here all today and to discuss this. Before we move on to the content, just to say, so we will hear introductory remarks from the panelists first, and then followed by the Q&A. But I already encourage participants to write their questions even when the panelists are speaking, so that we can address as many questions as possible by the end of the event. And then when the Q&A starts, you can also raise your hand, so that you can also ask your questions directly. So yeah, these are just some technical remarks before we start. And without any further ado, then I would like to give floor to Marcel Haag. Marcel, a lot has been done when it comes to the EU Sustainable Finance Agenda and its role in supporting the green transition and the Green Deal has been, I would say, widely recognized. And I would be happy to hear from you, say that the state of play, where we are today, given that a lot has been done in the last couple of years, but arguably more to come. And then what are these future prospects, developments of the Sustainable Finance Agenda, especially given the expected renewed Sustainable Finance Strategy. So Marcel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you for having me this morning. It's a pleasure to be part of this event. As you said, Stefan, a lot has already been done on sustainable finance since the Commission presented its action plan in 2018. We were early in the European Union to start working on sustainable finance, which is good because that has given us a head start now at a time when sustainable finance has been discovered by many jurisdictions around the world. And at the center, at the heart of what we are working on in the European Union is the EU Taxonomy. And we had a regulation which was adopted last summer, And now a lot of work has to go into making this framework that is set out in this regulation, making this operational. What we want to achieve with the EU taxonomy is to provide a common language that allows us to speak about which activities can be considered sustainable, and with this we want to help investors in their decisions. We want to prevent greenwashing. We want to make sure that companies are guided in their efforts to transition towards climate neutrality and avoid investing in assets that will ultimately turn out to be stranded assets. We want to make sure that companies can plan their transition, and we want to create market transparency, avoid market fragmentation by providing a language, a grammar that market participants can be used, and all of this obviously with the ultimate objective of making sure that investments are being shifted to where they are most needed to help the green transition. Now, a couple of days ago, on the 4th of June, the Commission formally adopted the first delegated act, which operationalizes the climate objectives of the taxonomy, and here we're covering 13 sectors with the highest contribution to CO2 emissions: energy, manufacturing, transport, buildings, as well as activities that are enabling the transformation. The European Parliament and the Council will now have a scrutiny period of 4 months, which can be extended by an additional 2 months to look into the Commission's delegated act. The delegated act, I should say, is a living document, which can be and will be adjusted over time with developments, and also with new technological developments and also new scientific insights. Companies and market participants will start reporting on their taxonomy alignment from January next year onward. We also published on the 8th of May for public comments a draft delegated act based on Article 8 of the Taxonomy Regulation, which will provide for rules on the disclosure of taxonomy-related information, with a view to creating market transparency and also avoiding greenwashing. Now, when we adopted the first delegated act in June, we left some unfinished work on the table. So one of our next steps will be to complete this work by also setting out the rules for certain energy activities and agricultural activities that were not yet covered by the delegated act in June. So work is ongoing on that. And then we have also launched the work on a further delegated act that will cover the 4 environmental activities that were also not covered in the first delegated act, where we only covered the climate objectives. But as you know, the taxonomy regulation also sets out 4 other environmental objectives on water and marine resources protection, on circular economy, on pollution prevention, and also on the protection of biodiversity and ecosystems. So that work has been launched and is ongoing. The Commission also presented a proposal for the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is basically updating and upgrading the non-financial reporting directive following a review of this directive. In this proposed directive, we will require large listed EU companies to disclose sustainability information. With this, we intend to increase the transparency with regards to sustainability information and impacts across European markets. With the directive, we make sure that the reporting requirements are aligned and comparable. We will also come forward still in the summer with a European green bond standard based on which will be based on the EU taxonomy. And here our objective is to create a gold standard for based on market best practice for green bond issuers that green bond issuers can use on a voluntary basis. And then we're also working on a renewal of our strategy. We will adopt this strategy in the coming weeks, and obviously work is still ongoing, but our objective is to provide a cross-cutting roadmap with new actions to increase private investment into sustainable projects and activities, and to support the different actions that are set out in the European Green Deal. One of the priority areas that we are looking at for the new strategy is the transition, and we want to look at in more detail at how the sustainable finance framework can enable inclusive transition finance for all companies. This is something that for which the foundations have already been laid down in the taxonomy regulation, but we realized in our more recent work that more needs to be done and more could be done to support the financial sector, but also the real economy in their journey towards climate neutrality, and that's what we want to do here. And then let me just before concluding say a word about the international dimension. We need coordinated efforts at the international level as well. We want to avoid a proliferation of different requirements, different standards worldwide, and we think that the time that we have a window of opportunity here to have a conversation at international level with the objective in mind to have a convergence towards common standards that are not just minimum standards, but that are ambitious standards that and criteria that we can build on. We believe that those standards, such a converged framework, international framework, should be sufficiently flexible to allow jurisdictions that want to go faster and want to be more ambitious have the possibility to do so and are not being held back. But we think that a set of common common rules would be desirable. We have co-initiated the International Platform for Sustainable Finance, in which we are working with 16 other jurisdictions on all areas of sustainable finance, including taxonomies. We will also actively contribute to the discussion that is ongoing in other fora, G7, G20, COP26, etc., to make sure that we promote an ambitious sustainable framework also around the world. And let me stop here.
Thank you so much, Marcel, for this overview of the sustainable finance agenda. Yeah, I feel like every single file that we would touch, it would turn into a policy dialogue on its own. Really, a very complex and diverse range of topics and subtopics within this initiative, and a lot has been done indeed. But indeed, as you mentioned, still more to come. So thank you for this concise overview of what is happening at the moment. Now I see that Sirpa Pietikäinen, a member of the European Parliament for the European People's Party group, has joined us, and I hope you that you are well connected, Sirpa.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I hope.
Yes, I see you and I hear you well.
And thank you, and sorry for joining a bit late, but I was in other engagement that was rather difficult and took a bit more time than expected. Anyway, I welcome wholeheartedly this ongoing debate about the sustainable finance and the next steps on the roadmap, because indeed it is not only the disclosure regulation or taxonomy, it is a question how we integrate all in all the sustainability aspects on financial regulation and economics on a wise way. And I just would like to underline the point wise, and this is where we need all these debates and co-creation with Commission, with ECB, with IFRS, with different other organizations, stability boards, and of course actors from banking to insurance and credit raters to investors, you name it. But the point is that what we would need is that kind of a, in the long run, global framework where we would have and that is the most, I guess, challenging, but the most crucial part. We would need to have a global data space, how you calculate and which harmonized indicators and harmonized life cycle analysis, the ecological footprint, and that matter, the qualification and metering of the social sustainability as well. Because if you lack the comparability, you lack everything. And there needs to be a new kind of a marrying between the financial sector and on the other hand, with natural capital accounting and all these. And basically, we have this information. It is just a big step to harmonize it so that we really do use the same calculation and benchmark methodologies. Second is to create a more sort of a simplified version of that. And what I usually call it is a nutritional value statistics. All cabbages are different, but you have that kind of an overall understanding how much protein or potassium you have in cabbage. And then you can, whatever SME is, you can calculate what is your coleslaw protein or calorie intake, because you can extract the information about the olive oils and eggs and the carrots and so on. And we can't expect the SMEs that are important part of our economies to have and develop their methodologies of own, but they need this kind of a data space to pick up the adequate proxy. What is the footprint of this car, detergent, electricity, or whatever that activity is? And these are not talked so much, but I think that these are the missing parts. And we should have a EU commitment, EU leadership, maybe some sort of a combination of a environmental agency and Eurostat, and globally be it then UN Environment, IFRS, Stability Board, World Bank, whatever that is, the framework where that is to be put. Then secondly, take this step that you integrate all the reporting. So do not make it too complex so that you have these and those reports. And that's why I would have preferred that we put the non-financial reporting or the sustainability reporting and accounting directive, because so this is de facto accounting. So you just collect the information. What is your footprint? We know more or less the 6-8 indicators you meet, and then in the longer run, the social aspect included, and integrated as it is on the way to IFRS. Integrated in the Basel 4 of Basel 5, whatever that is to be called on that phase, and create there this kind of a sort of a harmonized global approach. And EU should and is this kind of a driving force on this. Then the next step actually is to look what all appropriate financial regulations should be sort of scanned and changed. And of course, my sort of a favorite list of importance start with credit rating agencies. So compulsory to rate the environmental risks also, and that is public and private both, and to create their methodologies. Then second is, of course, the risk assessment, because be it double materiality or triple materiality, or be it just one risk, what is the framework? We would need to integrate and understand that if we destroy our environment or population, that matter, it's going to be a huge economic risk as well. And that should be then reflected, the risk reflection, also on banking rules and capital requirements. The riskier business, the more capital buffers, the higher interests. And that sort of gives, and this is even more important than to try to define, to square the ball, what is green in changing environment, to define what is significant harm, what is risk, what is substantial risk, and what should have different kind of risk weights in the future. And that of course then is reflected in solvency. It is reflected in insurance regulation and all that. And then we would have a vast work to do with this integrated basis to put that in respective regulation on the information requirements for retail investors, on alternative investment funds in that aspect. It touches them on all usage on MiFIDs, on PEPs, on PREPs, and you name it. And this is not to make life overly complicated, but to avoid the point that if we sort of look at the case by case when it happens, there's going to bound to be that kind of a differences by sectors that are ineffective and unhelpful. So that would be then the second part. And I know that I have a limited time, so I don't want to go in details. But my last favorite is that this is the finance sector, this is the private sector, but the public sector needs to shoulder its responsibility. It is the ECB, it is the investment bank, it's the cohesion funds, it is the European budgets, and it is the semester. The same metering and calculation with life cycle analysis. Where do you put your money? What is going to be the impact? And the restriction to use the money on significant harm, and the requirements that you do not sort of lose the natural capital like you could in-depth in natural capital like you in-depth in other capital classes. So it needs to be integrated there, because we shouldn't be subsidizing nationally and EU level the peat and the coal and other issues, no matter how much national interest there might be on the cases. So thank you for listening for me, and if there's still time and comments, I'm happy to be part of the debate.
Thank you so much, Sirpa, for your reflections, and happy that you managed to join the discussion. And indeed, I think what you said builds very nicely on also what Marcel Haag already mentioned, and also would highlight also what you said on that there more action is needed at the global level, and that simply we need this kind of common rules and a common language, also common, in a way, common grammar, also going back to what Marcel said, so that there is clarity in what is to be done on the reporting, and that people can basically orient themselves and know when they're investing what they should do and what is the effect on environment sustainability. And of course, happy to discuss this further during the Q&A. You can of course come back to some points also that you can further elaborate on. So thank you for now, and over to Olivier Boutellis-Taft. Olivier, we heard from the EU representatives on what is currently going on, and what is expected, also to what are the future developments. But then we'd be happy to hear from you, from your perspective, and the financial services sector's take on the current and sustainable finance agenda and upcoming activities. How do you see it, and how can in a way financial services sector be aligned and contribute to the sustainable financing and the Green Deal, and any additional reflections you can have also based on what previous speakers already said. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and good morning, everybody. I think this is a pretty challenging point, because after listening to Marcel and Sirpa, it seems that they've covered everything and didn't leave anything left for me. Very comprehensive presentations on the state of play. However, every time we talk about the state of play, I can't refrain from remembering an old joke that apparently happened between President Clinton and President Yeltsin a few years ago, I agree. And the joke goes that, Clinton is asking Yeltsin, well, what's the state of play today in the Soviet Union in one word? Yeltsin thinks very hard and says, in one word, it's good. So, Clinton is a little bit surprised and says, well, in two words, what would it be? Not good. And I think, the joke is probably untrue, but very relevant to the agenda we're talking about today. Because when we measure progress and how fast we're delivering, I think it's always striking for me to see that If we look back where we were, say, 2 years ago, we've made fantastic progress. If we look ahead and see where we need to be, and I'm not saying where we should be, I'm saying where we need to be to have still a livable planet in 10 years' time, we're really lagging behind. So it all depends on the viewpoint that you take. Having said that, I would really like to commend the European Commission and the European Parliament for what they've been doing. I have to confess that I spent the past 16 months traveling the world through Zoom, staying in my kitchen all the time, but still talking to a lot of people around the globe. And I am amazed by how much in Brussels we're sometimes missing, the amount of political leadership and political courage that we see on this issue in the institutions. So they really need to be praised, but we should not forget how we need to measure progress. And compared to where we need to be, I think there is still a lot that needs to happen in a very, very short time frame. And if we can commend, Marcel and Sirpa and the institutions they represent, personally, I'm very worried about what is going to happen at member states level. So especially, when the debate will take place in the council, I hope that we can count on the same level of leadership. Now, a number of pieces of legislations and debate have been mentioned by both Marcel and Sirpa, and I'd just like to react shortly on some of these points. So, of course, the EU taxonomy regulation, I mean, that is a very important piece of legislation. It's almost the building block of our whole sustainability transition strategy, the EU Green Deal. I would agree it's going in the right direction. I think there is a growing risk that it's appearing as we get into the details of the regulation, but the piece is maybe, well, let's say very complex and very difficult to implement in practice. Therefore, I think it would be really important that we as quickly as possible add implementation and interpretation guidance on how the detailed rules of the taxonomy and the delegated acts should apply. I think that's going to be really critical to make things happen on the ground. It was also mentioned that the EC actually proposed the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. I think that is really a cornerstone of the whole package. So it is important that we have good information, as Sirpa mentioned, to make sustainable decisions. So again, this is very important also with how the CSRD is starting the work on standards. And I think it is also important to encourage global cooperation on standards, indeed. But someone has to get started. And I think it's very good to see how the direction that the CSRD is taking. Now, it was mentioned, I think, by Marcel that in comparison with the old non-financial information directive, the scope is going to be enlarged. That is something that at Accountancy Europe we're supportive of, looking at large and listed companies on the basis of risk. I think this is a very substantial approach. That's good. I think there is a risk in a way, but we get lost into discussions on the scope while it is almost a secondary debate in the grand scheme of things. So again, we're going to have to prioritize very, very smartly if we want to make the progress that we need to make in a very short time frame. So information was mentioned very, very often, and the taxonomy or the CSRD, it's all about information that business is providing. And right now, a lot of information is being provided. A lot less reliable information is on the table. a lot less consistent information is on the table, a lot less comparable information is on the table. And I think the reliability of the information is absolutely essential, which explains why you see investors raising their voice and calling for third-party independent assurance on the information that business is producing. And I think the point has been noted and included into the CSRD. So moving to the renewed sustainable finance strategy, well, there are a number of very important things also here that will need to be taken into account. Natural capital accounting was mentioned. I think this is a foundational piece as well, very important. But I think at the end of the day, if we look at what all this means, and the old sustainability agenda is about us transforming the way we live and the way we do business. That's what it boils down to, I think, at the end of the day. So I think it is critically important with this in mind that we integrate sustainability in company strategy, that we really take this transformative approach of the way we work. And at a company level, that means transforming the business model and transforming our strategy. That is a matter for corporate governance. So I think it is important that the revised European Commission strategy on corporate governance confirms or reconfirms the central role that corporate governance is going to play or should play in the sustainability action plan. And that really, we can expand on that maybe later. But I thought it was also very important, the point that Sirpa made, to not only focus on climate, because everything is linked. So climate is critically important for the viability of the planet, but there are plenty of other things that we need to look at, biodiversity, soil degradation, for instance, and at the time where we're going to be talking about the CAP, I think that is particularly important. Business needs to integrate sustainability into everything we do. Policymakers maybe need to do the same. And that's why I thought it was very good that Sirpa talked about the public sector. At Accountancy Europe, we recently organized an event actually on public sector and sustainability. And the reason why was that the public sector in the EU is more or less 50% of our economy. So it's great we're asking finance and business to change, but it's going to be almost pointless if we don't ask the other 50% of our economy to change. That's the critical role of the public sector. So I'd just like to make 2 points in terms of conclusion. What I see as challenges moving ahead. Well, one is obviously speed. The second one is coherence and complexity of the legislation. And the third one is the quality and consistency of data. Very happy to come back to that. And I'll stop here for a moment. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Olivier, for these reflections and also reactions to what Marcel and Sirpa said already, and indeed that you touched upon a number of specific aspects that we need to keep in mind, so that indeed we need to ensure that the ambitions at the EU level are matched by those at the member state level. That we also have that the public sector, the public economy, is in a way part of this transition together with the private sector, and also that in a way it's also very much about the corporate governance, that it needs to be, that these ambitions need to be internalized also, not only to be something that's happening externally from the policy side, also looking at non-climate, also environmental biodiversity aspects, and these are actually interlinked with climate. So it's all in a way connected and can feed into these different objectives that we wish to achieve as part of the Green Deal. And indeed, a lot has been done, but depending on where we want to go, there is still more to come. So thank you, and of course, happy to come back to some of these points later. Now, moving on to our last panel speaker for today, Mathilde Crêpy. Listening to also other speakers, I'd be happy to to also hear from you, from the civil society perspective on the sustainable finance agenda and the taxonomy in particular. I would say, I think I didn't spell it out in the beginning, but I knew that it would be very much about the taxonomy. It's arguably a hot topic when it comes to the sustainable financing agenda, the Green Deal as a whole. So happy to hear your take from that perspective on the current developments on the sustainable finance agenda and what needs to be done to actually reach its full potential. So please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this panel. So I'm just going to say a few words about ECOS, the organization that I work for, just so that people better understand where I'm coming from. So ECOS is an environmental NGO. We work on the development of standards and of technical policies, and we are actually part of the platform on sustainable finance. So this is where I'm coming from. Also, while I'm member of the platform on sustainable finance, I'm not speaking on behalf of the platform this morning. So yeah. Well, it's a plea for everybody listening here that this is only my personal opinion and it doesn't reflect the opinion of the platform. So again, since coming from an environmental NGO, I'm coming here to this panel with an environmental expert hat, unlike the other panelists, it seems. So I would like to speak a little bit about, the environmental context first, because we haven't yet talked about, like the targets, what we want to achieve. And I think this is, really important to remember. So we have seen in the past couple of years, a lot of adoption of environmental strategies on, we have seen the adoption of the Zero Pollution Action Plan lately. For which one of the targets are to reduce plastic litter by 50% by 2030, or to improve air quality by 55% by 2030. There has been last year the adoption of the biodiversity strategy, for which 20 billion a year for biodiversity is meant to be set aside. And also, 30% of the land is meant to become a protected area. There was also the adoption of the Circular Economy Action Plan, or the revision of the Circular Economy Action Plan, which plans to double the circular material used by 2030. And then obviously the climate and energy targets, which have been revised and for which now the objective is to reach 55% reduction by 2030 and to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. So this is really the context and the political objectives that we have. This political objective, these political targets, they are extremely ambitious. And they really require so much investments and so much money to be redirected to the right activities, the right assets, and so on. So, for example, just for the climate and energy target for 2030, the amount of money that needs to be invested every year, in addition to what's already committed, is 350 billion a year. So this is really massive, and it only covers the climate and energy targets. So this is the challenge ahead of us, and well, indeed, so many things have happened since the adoption of the Sustainable Finance Action Plan in 2018. So Olivier spoke about actually all the speakers talked about the adoption of the taxonomy regulation, which is really indeed the backbone of the entire system, and which is also a very, very good place to start. What we've seen is that the way the debate has been politicized in getting into technical criteria has actually been detrimental in some sectors when it came to laying down the conditions and the technical screening criteria for the taxonomy. And I'm happy to get back to that later if there are questions on the taxonomy specifically. There has been also the launch of the revision of the NFRD, which is something that NGOs definitely called for and are really happy to see. So indeed, the enlargement of the scope to all large companies is a good thing. Once again, I think, I mean, well, what Olivier said is very right. There are still high risk, well, companies operating in high risk sectors that are not included, and this continues to be a problem. So what we call for is the inclusion of, you know, SMEs operating in high risk sectors to be also included in this in the scope of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And it's something that we hope to see in the renewed sustainable finance strategy. We have seen also with the launch of the revision of the NFRD, the development of generic and European sector-specific standards. This is a really great step forward, because up until now, the data provided by companies were not very comparable. As Olivier mentioned, and I think this will really help making sure that reporting is much more comparable and much more and that it creates, you know, a sort of a competition to the top also. And finally, we have also seen the development of new tools, for example, the EU Eco-label for financial products, which is yet to be finalized. Our expectation when it comes to what still needs to happen on the renewed sustainable finance strategy is, first and foremost, the finalization of the taxonomy, and above all, the preservation of the integrity of the taxonomy. Marcel said that the climate delegated act, actually the climate taxonomy, was not yet final. The two delegated acts that are still yet to come on agriculture and on energy are making us extremely nervous. We are extremely afraid that the credibility of the entire system that has taken, you know, years to build will you know, hang on the adoption of the agriculture and the energy related, well, the gas and nuclear related delegated acts in, you know, planned for towards the summer or September. We're already not very pleased with some of the sectors. So basically the taxonomy at the moment is already very unbalanced when it comes to the level of ambition of the different sectors covered in the taxonomy. And this is very problematic. So what we hope is that, you know, in the strategy, there will be clear signal that the integrity of the green taxonomy will be protected. The other aspect that we would like to see is the extension of the taxonomy to also cover unsustainable, environmentally not sustainable activities, and also activities which, you know, do not create a substantial impact to the environment, so that we make sure that we minimize the blind spots. At the moment, a lot of the criticisms against the taxonomy, and also a lot of the, I guess, you know, fears for the green taxonomy is that if you're not green, you're brown or you're environmentally harmful. Well, that isn't the case, and only by extending the taxonomy towards, you know, environmentally harmful activities, but also activities which either are not material for the environment, or are in that, you know, in between, like between the environmentally harmful and the environmentally sustainable activities, can we, you know, achieve much better information and minimize the blind spots when it comes to the environmental performance of economic activities and economic operators and investors as well. So that's on the taxonomy. I still have two things to mention. What do we also expect to see from the renewed sustainable finance strategy is some work on retail investment. And it has been mentioned, but very like in the background actually. So what we would like to see is firstly that there is a very good monitoring of whether or not financial advisors ask retail investors about their sustainability preferences. We would like that, well, the EU eco-label for financial products is finalized and used, because we have seen already that consumers recognize the EU eco-label and they use it, and it creates trust. So we should definitely use that wonderful instrument. Also, there should be minimum standards for so-called sustainability funds. So it's not because the taxonomy will exist that funds will stop being called eco-friendly or sustainable or green or responsible. So at the moment, this is still something that is very much left to up for the person, you know, proposing that fund to, you know, to label their fund as, you know, sustainable, responsible, and so on. So we would like to see really minimum standards for those funds that are for retail investors. And we would like to see that remuneration incentives for financial advisors are not working against the achievement of environmental political targets. Last but not least, what we expect from the strategy is more work on better accounting of risk, and I think this is what Sirpa mentioned quite a lot. And we would like to see maybe the revision of the capital requirement regulation and the systematic inclusion of climate stress tests when it comes to financing, you know, physical assets such as, you know, big infrastructures or well, anything linked to sectors that are extremely vulnerable to climate change because of, you know, flash floods, because of droughts, because of, you know, and maybe on the data related aspect, one thing is that, you know, those risk assessments, they should be based not only on extrapolating, you know, past data, but on creating modeling that, you know, enable to take into account future climate data as well. Just to make sure that, you know, physical risks are much better taken into account. And the risk also of stranded asset is much better taken into account. Voilà.
Thank you, Mathilde, for providing this also a number of points. Also, what is expected from your side, but also what more is to be done. I think illustrated well what is the scope of possibilities when it comes to the further development of the sustainable finance agenda, but also going back to what you, I think it's good what you underlined, what the environmental and climate objectives are, and the scale of the investments that is to be expected. And in a way, then what is done so far is substantial, but still more definitely needs to be done. And as you mentioned, including also sectors such as agriculture, energy in the discussion, keep safeguarding the integrity of the taxonomy, tackling SMEs, and they are part of the sustainability reporting, and creating the EU eco-label, and a number of topics, of course, that we can come back to some of them at least during the discussion. So thank you so much for your inputs on this at this point. Now, I would like to already go to the questions that we received. But just to say that if you wish to add something during the discussion, please do so. No need for me to introduce it. You can just maybe raise your hand and you can just jump in and provide your comments on what the participants asked, or what other speakers already mentioned. So I see 3 questions. I see one hand raised. I would start with Teresa Selvaggio. She raised her hand. Would like to hear her question before I go back to others. So if we can unmute Teresa. Yes, please.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay.
Indeed.
Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. I don't know if I'm able to switch on my camera, but I will leave it like that, maybe. Thank you very much. This is the momentum for sustainable finance, as we all know, and closing the financing gap is extremely important at the moment. I wanted to put on the table and in the discussion an additional topic, if you allow me. I'm talking on behalf of Enel, the Italian electricity company, and we issued back in 2019 the first general purpose sustainability linked bond, so which is a financial instrument rather different than the use of proceeds approach of green bonds. Of course, green bonds will have to play an important role, and the standardization is welcome. But I would like to put in the discussion also to hear from the speakers what is their view, their perception on general purpose sustainability linked bond, which put at the core rather the sustainability strategy of a company rather than specific investments or projects. So we think at Enel that they can complement the green bond approach, especially in this moment of recovery and of a transition of the real economy towards sustainability. So generally speaking, I would like to put this question to all speakers, and in particular to Director Haag, I would like to ask whether the European Commission is considering this innovative financial instrument. Recently, there have been important moves by ICMA, by the European Central Banks in the recognition and in the standardization of this financial instrument. And so I would like to know whether there is a debate at the European Commission level, if they are considering these kind of instruments, and maybe already in the renewed sustainable finance strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for your question. And yeah, I think it's yeah, we can start indeed with the green bond also topic. We also had some questions that I just wanted to. There was an interest, for example, when will the green bond standard regulation at the EU level, so the green bond, will be published? Proposal will be published. Will it be already on the 6th of July, beginning of July? If there are any hints that could be already provided from our EU representatives. Maybe this is something that could be for Marcel Haag, but I see Sirpa already raised her hand, and maybe you can already provide your reflections on this topic, and of course any additional reflections on what the speakers said so far, and then we can move on.
Thank you. Some of the reflections, these are more or less taxonomy related. I mean, very much on board with those speakers that criticized the taxonomy. I quite deliberately left that outside because I thought someone else will probably raise it out. But it says on the first level regulation in 3 different points that the indicator, the criteria must be science-based. It must be based on indicators and life cycle analysis. And it says that when you sort of see the level, so where to put the bar, it needs to be substantially better than the industry average. And we all know, and I don't go in details, but it's a disgrace how member states sort of took hand of the delegated acts and lobbied it. And I'm worried about the gas in the future. But for example, forests that do have the reference that they are sustainable if they follow EU and national regulation. My only sort of a rhetoric question is, how can you be substantially better than the industry average if you follow the legislation, because everybody is expected to follow the legislation. And so it is on borderline, just to give you the hint, if someone wants to do it, that someone should sue the commission on court about the delegated acts, that it doesn't sort of go in line with the first level. And this is in risk because this is especially, it can be much weaker than, not all, but some, because we have the greenwashing, some of the existing market practices and standards. And isn't it a disgrace that they use its sustainability and green standard and taxonomy with that kind of a lot of boosting and inspiration what we have been having. And it is worse than what the markets are doing. I'm just lacking the words. This is serious issue, and I'm being personally very involved. I'm a bit like in facing Sophie's choice. What do you do when your kid is turned to be a walking dead? And don't want to continue the story any further. But anyway, and that goes into the next, and what kind of structures we have already. I think that the brown end, or the significant harm end, is indeed much more important than the green end, because it defines where the risk should be benchmarked, firstly. And secondly, it kicks the 30 trillion yearly on unsustainable investments to move to more sustainable ones. And what gets tricky is that how you avoid some companies, let's pick up a Shell or whatever, to be put in lock-in position. And that actually is the transitional category. But the taxonomy doesn't allow, as it stays at the moment, it doesn't allow the sort of categorization of companies. And I think that we should have at some point a review extension or whatever, that if you have a company that has a clear transition plan to climate neutrality and the sustainability by 2030, 35, and they audit their reports and they follow what they say, and it is reliable, there should be this kind of a transitional company sector or category in taxonomy, because that would incentivize those ones that are in the DNSH category, them to move up to better categories. But this is something where I'm very eager in the future to have, if the commission has some new thinking, if that could be sort of met. I understand very well that now the hands are so full with the delegated acts of the existing taxonomy that there hasn't been that much of a possibility to think about this. Thank you.
Sirpa, for coming back to these points also on the taxonomy and a number of others, and I would like to, maybe Marcel, if you could then react to some of what has been said so far in the panel, and also by one of our participants, by Teresa, on the green bonds. Also, just to say, we had a question on the green bonds from Caroline Francois Marcel. So, question on if the green bond standards regulation proposal will be published in July 6th. If there are any hints on this question. And one more, I think that we could already put together more like the specific question from Carolina Vigo, that it is expected that the IPSF report comparing the EU and Chinese taxonomies is expected in the end of June. And if this is something that you could say, if this is something to be still expected, if you have this information, of course. If it's too much specific, I guess is something to be addressed till later. point. But yeah, and happy to hear from you on this, on the green bonds especially, but any additional reflections you have on what was said so far.
Let me focus on the green bonds. I think what's been said about the taxonomy, I think illustrates the difficulties that we are facing with the development of the EU taxonomy. It shows how hard it is to develop a taxonomy that is science-based, but at the same time also takes due account of an EU acquis in the various sectors that is oftentimes not yet aligned with our European Green Deal target, and where simply because the acquis predates the European Green Deal. Now we are doing a lot of work to bring the acquis up to speed, and we will present this as part of the Fit for 55 package that the Commission will present in a couple of weeks in July. I think we heard a lot of examples of how difficult the task at hand is, and the Commission is doing its best to maintain the level of ambition and to operationalize an EU taxonomy that will lead us effectively to climate neutrality. But let me come to the green bonds. For the time being, we don't have a standard. So you know, whatever you call green is green. What we want to do with the EU green bond standard is to present a high quality standard that market participants are free to use. It will be a voluntary standard. So it can coexist with other green bond, sustainability bonds, whatever. They would not be, you know, you could not call them an EU green bond, but in order to do that, you would have to comply with the standard. But it will coexist. And here our expectation would be that the highest standards and the higher standards will squeeze out the lower quality standards over time. I mean, that does not exclude the solution that Mathilde referred to, or which would consist of creating minimum standards for products that are being called green. But this is not what we are doing with the EU green bond standard, to be clear about that. Now, as regards timing, we are still working towards a presentation of the proposal by July. So that is still the plan, but obviously, you know, these things can also change, can also still change. Now, on the question of transition, obviously, this is one of the areas, and I mentioned it before, that we want to pay particular attention to as part of our renewed sustainable finance strategy. the transition is a fact. There is no button to press to switch from non-sustainable to fully sustainable. It is a journey. It is a journey, and we have to accompany this journey. And this journey also has to be financed. So we have to make sure that we get the incentives right for financing the transition. In that context, we are also reflecting on whether there is a need to have specific instruments, such as, for instance, transition bonds, that could be particularly suitable for financing the transition. This is something that we are currently looking into. Maybe I'll leave it at that.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Marcel. I think this is a very good also response from your side at this point. And of course, I mean, recognizing that, as mentioned, this is really like a whole universe, and every single topic is a universe on its own.
Stefan, sorry, I didn't want to dodge your question on the IPS. On the IPSF.
Yeah, you should, if you have any updates, these are concrete questions, then it's just if you have any update on the file, of course.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, indeed, we are working very hard on this on the comparison between the Chinese and EU taxonomies, and we will deliver on time. There will be a report as foreseen this summer.
Thanks a lot. No, thanks a lot for this update. I think it's also useful for our participants, other stakeholders to know. So yeah, thank you for this, and it's also goes back to this whole global action at the global level. In a way, needs to start by comparing. Especially like major economies such as the European and the Chinese one. So, yes, I see Mathilde raised her hand, and just to say, I mean, of course, happy for you to then respond to the questions and reflections we heard so far. Maybe this is a chance for you, if you wish to touch upon any specific points on the taxonomy. Now, since we have like 15 minutes left, there was a question just to highlight from Jacqueline Zhu on what are the existing environmental databases you would recommend. I think it's a bit, maybe the general context may be lacking, but I think you mentioned, goes back maybe to some of your reflections on the data, and any thoughts you could share on that could be of relevance to the sustainable financing, and expand upon what you already said. Happy to hear from you at this point.
Thank you, Stefan. Actually, I raised my hand to react on the transition finance. And I think that the database-related question was more addressed to Mrs. Pietikäinen, who referred to the creation of a database. So I will leave that one out. But on transition finance, well, I think it's really important. Sorry, I think there is some background noise. Is it possible?
Yes, maybe a bit. I'm not sure. Sirpa, maybe it could be coming from your side. If you can mute yourself, and then I will give you the floor after Mathilde's done. Thank you. Yes,
Thank
Mathilde,
you very
please.
much.
Yes.
So on transition finance, it is a very tricky. Place and something for which NGOs are very careful that there is no confusion between what is transition and what is green. So what is already environmentally sustainable, contributing already to the objectives of the environmental objectives, and what is in the process of getting better. And so there are also my understanding is that this transition finance would rely on transition plans, which are yet to be specified, and for which we need to make sure that they are credible, that they are third-party verified, that they include ex post assessment on whether or not the targets that have been set in those transition plans are actually indeed achieved. And all of this really needs to be very, very well specified so that there is no room for, you know, sneaking in, well, I would say bad transition finance or well, investments labeled as transition when they are actually not even better than, you know, than what would have happened anyways. So I think this is really important and really something that I wanted to highlight on transition finance. Also, I think that there are some investments for which we don't need to transition, actually, for which there is the possibility to have a switch from one to a environmentally harmful technology to an environmentally sustainable activity. And for those, and for example, I'm talking about well, the production of electricity, for which, you know, transitioning from, for example, from solid fuel, like coal, let's say, or coal or lignite, to renewable energy, which is taxonomy aligned, is definitely possible and can happen like that. So well, basically, we don't need gas. We don't need that in between for that. And so I think there are some sectors for which we should not even open the floor or the possibility for transition to take place. Voilà. Thank you. And also, I take this opportunity, since I'm a panelist in this, I saw a very interesting question. Sorry, Stefan, I'm taking a little bit your job here. But I saw in the chat a very interesting discussion addressed to Mr. Haag on and raised by Sébastien Godino. So if we have time, I would be very interested in hearing the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathilde. Thank you for your reflections on this. And yeah, I see that Sirpa, you raised your hand, and indeed would be happy to hear from you on what we said so far and the questions we received. And there are a number of questions I would also like to just mention that we received from the participants. So, for example, from Hanna Luskiewicz, so what is the EPP's position towards the delegated act on the technical screening criteria? Also from Jakub Groskowski, if he understood correctly, you suggested that the taxonomy should not categorize activities but rather companies, or is there anything that you could provide on top of what you said on this? And just to see if there is anything else in particular to mention from the yeah, I think we can stop at these questions, and of course happy to hear additional reflections from your side, Sirpa. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, about the data spaces, very briefly, there about I would say 20 very respectful, very good data spaces about natural capital, environmental footprints, and the life cycle analysis. And then in the context when it is linked to finances, there are two and attempts to coordinate them in the World Economic Forum, on OECD, on IFRS, on global benchmark initiative. I can send you email if you want later on. But if you start very easily and simply with UN environment, and there the UN BRI, and if you start with the European Commission and natural capital accounting and PEF, and that is the EU model for life cycle analysis, I'm sure you can find the rest after the comments, those ones to follow that are the most significant ones. And the Commission has a very good resort of these data spaces as well. So if you address them, please, you'll find more detailed information. Then about what is EPP position, anything, everything, and in between. And while this is highly politicized and member state lobbying, we Finns, except me, think that it is too harsh on the forests. I think it is too loose, as you hear, on the forest. The Polish colleagues think it is too harsh on the coal. I think it is too on right level on the coal. The gas is going to be a major, significant fight. And there's millions, and I'm just imagining what is happening when we get to biodiversity. And we have to remember this is only the first slot of climate criteria. And then we have the whole 6 other sectors and patches of criteria coming up. So this is going to be a continuous debate. So please be alert, aware, and active. And we are still in a process of coordinating our position in EPP, whether we are in favor or against. We have both voices. My wild guess would be that we are supporting the delegated acts as it is, and will vote for plus on it. No, I wouldn't replace existing taxonomy with companies. It is just to add the companies. So add the transitional category, because now, for example, what is lobbied very heavily is that the gas pipe could be green and as a transitional green investment, as well as nuclear. You could sort of compensate this pain to change from coal to renewables to have the transitional category also for companies. And so if you commit yourself on being within 12 years totally green on solar energy or whatever, you could be categorized that. What was the another question? It was still, I guess, one.
Yeah, no, I think that was basically it on the database, on the technical screening, and on the question on companies versus activities. There were previous questions on the green bond standard that was more general for all the speakers, but should you have any comments on this?
Well, I think that what the Commission is planning and how we are proceeding sounds pretty good. And yes, definitely we would need to have those standards. And there's the big question, and that's why we would need to get the taxonomy right as well. We can't have different standards on private and public and bonds and credit requirements, or be it what. And it was thought that the taxonomy is the standalone understanding how to calculate it, and it should be developed future to be this sort of like accounting, 50 shades of green and gray, because there are different categories and different phases in companies, and you can't master it only by classification on significant harm and green and semi-green. You need to give the whole accounting, and this is the CSRD and IFRS idea, and then we need the ratings to sort of rank the different businesses in different places on this world. Thank you. And sorry, I guess I need to be running off, so excuse me.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Sirpa, for your reflections on this, and that you were a part of this discussion. And yeah, indeed, we will end in a couple of minutes. But I would like to also give the floor to Olivier, and if you would like to provide any, say, final thoughts and reflections on what was said so far, and on any questions you would like to take. One question that I was just wondering if you have anything to say on is on the from Jakub Grozkowski, that recently we hear from the Commission and the platform on sustainable finance that companies that cannot reach sustainability thresholds defined by the taxonomy regulation will have to present reliable, robust transitional plans, and that their reliability is to be assessed by financial institutions. And if this will have any subjectivity criteria included? I mean, it's a bit specific questions, but should you have any thoughts on this, would be happy to hear from you. But otherwise, any general reflections? One also that I wanted to ask, given the Corona crisis and the changes it brought to our economy, and you know, if you have any messages in a way on the direction of the sustainable finance agenda, given the whole recovery efforts and the challenges also facing the financial sector. If you have any additional reflections on that, happy to hear that, but also any other reactions on what we heard so far in your key messages.
Well, thank you very much, Stefan. And I'm afraid we've got 2 minutes left, and I think I would need at least 3 hours to answer, you know, the different questions that you've put to me. And I'll just take advantage of being at the very end of this conversation to disagree with absolutely everybody and not give them a chance to respond. You know, that will also enable me to answer hopefully questions. But when I hear Marcel say that the transition is a fact, I wish I could believe him, but for me, it is a wish, it is an ambition. And if I look at any indicator out there, whether it's carbon emissions, you know, whether it's biodiversity loss, whether it's water, whatever indicator you take, the only sign is that we're continue accelerating in the wrong direction. So I know what Marcel wanted to say, and I don't disagree with him. But I think the transition needs to happen. But right now, it's not much more than a wish. And I think that's what needs to change. When also in line with the transition, I think I hear Mathilde and Sirpa as well saying, well, we've got green activities on the one hand, brown activities on the other hand, and we're very cautious about the transition bit in between. I'm afraid we're all in that transition bit in between, all of us as individuals, all of us as business, whatever is the sector. There is no such thing as clean electricity. There is less dirty electricity, but there is no clean electricity, especially if we take the life cycle approach that Sirpa has been talking about a number of times. So these are very complex choices at the end of the day. We would like them to be as simple as possible, but I suppose as Einstein was saying, you know, let's make it as simple as possible, but not too simple. That's going to be the big challenge, I think, moving ahead. And if I take the example of, you know, renewable energies and electricity, it's a little bit on purpose also, and the transition thing. Because there was one comment, I think, in the Q&A that I found also very interesting. Unfortunately, it was from an anonymous contributor who was regretting that we didn't invite a real economy company. I agree, but that is important because all these companies will be impacted and all these companies have to change. And I think that's really what, you know, the lesson that we need to keep in mind. And listening to Sirpa commenting on the dynamics in the parliament, well, I think the same thing applies as to business. This is not a political issue. This is not an ideological issue. You're not pro-business or anti-business. You just want to still keep a planet on which we can live. And that is what science is saying, not ideology. And we've got less than 10 years to do that. So I think that's really where we need to focus. That was my conclusion. The detailed answer to the detailed question. I think there are people whose business it is for ages now to provide external third-party independent assurance. They stand ready. I think there are more people than the accountancy profession actually who can do that, but we've got a pretty long expertise in that field. That is where the assurance should be coming from, not people who also have a vested interest into the answer of this assurance. I'll stop here, and I'm sorry I disagreed with all the speakers, but they don't have a chance to answer, so that's good.
No, thanks, Olivier. Thanks, Olivier, for your final reflections on this for this topic. And I think it's in a way what you said that you don't disagree with all or everything was said is a way maybe a nice introduction for further discussions on this and to keep the ball rolling in a way, because as you said, it's I mean, a lot has been achieved, but indeed, given the ambitions, it's much more to be achieved, and we can discuss further on this for sure, and especially also finding this golden mean between simplicity, but also not keeping it too simple, because we simply it's a very complex and very serious matters we are discussing when it comes to sustainable financing. So thank you so much. And indeed, I think we came to the end of today's discussion, and I would like to slowly wrap it up and say, really, to thank all the speakers for their very valuable, very useful contributions to today's discussion, and also to participants for their very active involvement, very interesting questions that we try to address as much as we can in a relatively limited time frame. So indeed, thank you so much. We will definitely continue this discussion, and meanwhile, I wish you a nice day and good work in the coming period. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.